What's the difference between being rich and being wealthy?
I want to talk about the real truth about financial freedom. Flashy watches, flashy cars, and probably a lot of debt.
But if you're up to your ears in debt servicing, then you're not really free.
If we can define rich versus wealthy for a moment, how would you put it in your mind?
Yeah, wealthy is where you have much more control over your time, decision making, and things of that nature.
You can have everything, but if you don't have yourself, then you really don't have anything at all. You might be a millionaire, but you still owe $2 or $3 million on your mortgage for your house. So by technical definition, you're rich.
Have you designed your life in the way that you want to live? And most people just don't know what they want. I want to be happy. Okay, well, what does that mean? Time really goes past very, very quickly until they kind of realize that they're not necessarily where they want to be.
Wealthy people almost become impervious to external events.
Yeah. If you have to do something versus you choosing to do it, is actually a very, very different mind space to be in. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money Investing Show. Let me ask you a question. What's the difference between being rich and being wealthy? Most people see them as being the same thing, but there are some nuances and major differences, as you're about to see. Make sure you take notes, but most importantly, as always, make sure you take action. See you in the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider and co-host, Mitchell Olarenshaw.
Good to be here, Mr. B. Now, gee whiz, we've got a bit of a left of field episode in here for our listeners today, but I'm really excited about this. Different areas of perspective on this one. I want to talk about the real truth about financial freedom, why it's not about getting rich, but rather about becoming wealthy.
Interesting. They sound like they're the same thing, but are they really? I guess that's what we're going to explore.
I don't think they are. And we'll try and draw on some personal anecdotes from this one, I think, in different areas of our life. I mean, yours probably more so yourself to this degree. But let's talk about that difference from the get-go. If we can define rich versus wealthy for a moment, how would you put it in your mind?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the term rich. I'm really not. I do think wealthy is a far better term. I think, without wishing to pay due care and attention to other people's feelings, it's probably more socially acceptable too, insofar as, rich is almost a derogatory term.
It is. I agree.
Versus wealthy, which seems to carry some color, and it's a syntax, that's all. But yeah, and I think, rich, what does it mean? What does wealthy really mean at the end of the day? Because it's a different thing to all people. I know when I was growing up, my parents were, my dad worked in a car factory, my mom was a cleaner, and we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we were happy. And is that something that's really the benchmark? And happiness, I think, is an underrated commodity. And you can be happy with a decent slab of money in the bank, or you can be happy with no money in the bank. I know what I prefer. Gives you a lot more flexibility, I suppose, to fix problems. But yeah, happiness is probably what it boils down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'll put a different spin on this and take that as well. I think there's a lot of people who are rich by definition. If you think about here in Australia, there's roughly about 8 million people out of our population which are millionaires. So by the technical definition, they are rich. But what does that actually look like? Because you might be a millionaire, but you still owe $2 or $3 million on your mortgage for your house, have 3 different car leases, and still owe the bank money in various areas. So by technical definition, you're rich, you can afford it. But are you really flexible? Are you free? And do you have unlimited choice? And the answer to that, I would say, in most people's instance would be no.
Yep. And I know it's something that your father coined and you've passed on through your legacy and generation too, and that's lifestyle inflation. Yeah. And, on paper, some people, they might look rich. You've got a car, boat, big house, whatever it might be. But if you're up to your ears in debt servicing, then you're not really free. And I think that's the difference between being wealthy and being rich. I think wealthy is where you have much more control over your time, decision making, and things of that nature.
Well, let's draw on wealthy a little bit more, because I think for the goal for you and I think as we've progressed, it's taken me probably a good 5 or 6 years to realize this, admittedly, is that it's not about all of the fancy stuff, which don't get me wrong, we both have and is really nice to have, but motivations are different. So if we talk about everything that is wealthy, which maybe isn't then rich. So you mentioned control and flexibility. What does that look like to you?
I think it's. I always say to people, retirement isn't about age; it's about income. And if you've got the ability to spend your time doing what you want to do, when you want to do it, with whom you want to do it, really, that's effectively retirement. And obviously, to do that does require a level of income, wealth to sit behind that, to give you that flexibility of decision making, I suppose. I see that firsthand with my kids. When there's something on at school, I do have the ability to go if I want to, which invariably I do.
You mean like a sports carnival or something like that?
Yeah, sports carnival, or there's an end of year, the Christmas thing, or end of term awards and those sorts of things. And it's interesting looking around the crowd to see who's there and who's not. And I think that gives a good insight into where people sit, whether they're still having to chase dollars or whether they've been able to buy their time back. It's just an anecdotal observation in my world at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and we talk about you for a second here. I mean, you've absolutely busted your butt to be wealthy. You're a business owner who's taken a massive amount of risk and worked incredibly hard and been smart. And now you've got the ability to buy back that time. I think it's far easier to become rich. You know, it's not that hard to go and get a car lease for a fast sports car. And anyone can almost do that if you've got a reasonable level of income. But to be able to work when you feel like working and not, in your instance, is the gift of wealth.
Yeah, I guess it is, but I still choose to because I love what I do. Yeah. And I guess, you know, once you find whatever your groove might be in life, if it's something that you enjoy, for me, like I literally had this conversation the other day with my mother-in-law, and we had a public holiday coming up on the Monday, and she's like, "You're right." I said, "Yeah, yes." And I said, "Looking forward to public holiday." I said, "But I'd almost rather be at work because I love what I do." And she's like, looked at me through the really, and it's like, yeah, because I enjoy the mission that we're on as an organisation, and I guess it's purpose-driven to an extent. And I appreciate this might sound a bit woolly, and there'll be the cynics out there go, "Yeah, nice, whatever you got to say, bullshit," whatever the story might be to go alongside that. The facts remain. That's exactly how I see it. We are on a mission to help people, and I love being part of that as our team do. And so, being able to work when you want to work, and if you want to keep working and do what you do, that's great. But whenever you get to do anything through choice rather than obligation is really quite different. If you have to do something, or someone's telling you you have to do something versus you choosing to do it, is actually a very, very different mind space to be in. And I'm really minded that, we're speaking to a lot of people with this broadcast, and if you're an employee and you work for somebody, they do have command over how you spend your time, and you've got to do what you need to do to provide for your family or whatever your mission might be. And it's not to say that that's not a good pathway to be on. It is. It just happens to be the vehicle that most people take. If you're able to get a plan B running on the side, whether it be a side hustle, get your investing under control, or other things, where you can work towards buying that time back if that's something that's really important to you. And I there are a lot of things that come through my inbox of a day, and there's one religiously that I read every single week, and that's James Clear, our favorite author, Atomic Habits. And he's got a newsletter. I think it's the most subscribed newsletter now globally. And he's got his thoughts, comments, and a couple of quotes in there. And one of the ones just from fairly recently was, the true measure of success, happiness, or contentment is if you look at have you designed your life in the way that you want to live.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and it's a nice little philosophical one to throw out there. So if for you getting up and having a surf 4 days a week is something that's really important to you, and you can build an income or a career, let's say you're a tradie and you go, look, I'm a chippy or a sparky or whatever it might be, but I won't be on site till 10:30 because I'm surfing, and that's it. And you're able to build your business around that. More power to you, because you're spending the time that you want to spend doing the things that you want to do. That's a level of success or wealth that you've got control of your time to do that sort of thing at one level. But yeah, you just got to look at, am I doing what I want to do? Because life's pretty short. It can be over in a heartbeat without being morose and depressing. And if you sat back and did the rocking chair test and looked at your life, did you do everything you wanted to do? Did you have a crack at everything? Did you hold back? And if you're constrained by having to be for 40 hours a week doing something you don't particularly want to do, but you've got to do it because you're a slave to the dollar, versus being able to create a lifestyle where you can do the things you want to do, who's the most fulfilled out of those two people?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the trick here, to add something to that, live below your means, most importantly, and don't have lifestyle inflation, and you're always going to be in some level of financial surplus doing that. I think when you're in surplus, you then have more choice. Yeah. What probably stands out for me, for rich people versus wealthy people, is that wealthy people have more control and more security, where they almost become impervious to external events. Let's say, for example, we were to go through another financial crisis, or you were to lose your job. Can you continue to support your family? If the answer is yes, then I think you're pretty wealthy in that sense. If the answer is, I've got to go and find a job tomorrow because I can't afford the mortgage or the rent and the car lease and the grocery bill, then you're really not that wealthy, you behold it to someone else.
Well, the debt side of the ledger has gone up with the income side typically in that instance, and you're quite right. I think being impervious to that, and there's no statement of arrogance in it. It just means that you've taken the time to feather your nest to do things, and in reality, the primary way to be able to do that is to make short-term sacrifices in order to get the long-term outcome. And there are countless examples of that across our client base. There are countless examples of that in our office. There are countless examples of that in people that we know outside of this. And it's a very, very well tried and tested path. And I guess, that flies in the face of saying, okay, you've only got a short time on the planet, so do everything, but do it in the right order. Do it when you can, as opposed to when other people or the peer pressure or somebody else's timeline dictates it. And a really simple example as an observation of you is, for the first 6 years that you were here working extremely hard and building your base, you didn't do fancy holidays. You just saved, and you just kept reinvesting your money to the point now where heading over to Europe and beach clubbing around the Med for a month is something that you can do now, because and do it without the opportunity cost of, if I do this, it means I'm going to be living at home for the rest of my life because I can't get in the property market, or I've got to go and rent somewhere I don't want to live. You've taken care of all the other stuff first, which is given you the opportunity to then say, well, okay, now I can have a little bit of color. Not too much, because I know you're still pretty careful with what you do and you're doing other things, but nonetheless, the syntax has been right. So do everything, but do it in the right order. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And that short-term sacrifice, I did an interview with somebody just last week, and I think you got a Guernsey on the same podcast actually. And I was listening to myself thinking, holy smoke, and I was talking very specifically when I bought my first place in London, and I used to train after work. I'd have a shower at the gym, so I didn't have to use my hot water at home. The city would be dead quiet because the square mile where the City of London is effectively housed is probably pretty quiet after 7:30. Come out the gym, having had a sauna and shower and all that, and then I'd go down to the Tesco Metro, and they've got a discount anything that's going out of date tomorrow. So I'd buy my dinner based on what was discounted. And I'm looking at this going, but that enabled me to save enough money to get my mortgage paid down quickly and to put myself in a position to move into my next property transaction, which back then was such a pivotal stepping stone in helping me get to where I am today. And looking back at it, I'm not going to say I'd say I'm unrecognizable, because I still, as you well know, carry some of those traits with me in terms of being careful. At the same time, that was a shorter term, and it wasn't a sacrifice at all. I'm talking about it now with a smile on my face, because they were halcyon times. It was great fun, but that was just a deliberate, conscious decision I made at that time to make my financial life easier then, and now I'm enjoying the reward of that.
It's funny you say this. For our listeners listening out there, having traveled with you extensively, AB, the Qantas Club single-handedly has pretty much funded your entire shaving kit since you went to platinum. Because I know every time we go, you get a shaving kit, and that's what you use. You don't buy Gillette like the rest of the population. You rely on that.
Look, I mean, serendipity. I mean, they're the quirks that we have, and without those, we'd be pretty boring. But look at other people in my circle. I got a dude that I know. I was at a car function a while ago, and he had something like 80, 90 childcare centres, which he sold out into a listed entity. Now runs a family office. And the guy is in a position where, he runs a family office for his wealth, which is really significant. You're not talking 10 or 80 or 100 million. I'm talking a really significant amount of money. Yet the value system that he had, and I was talking about, he said, it was such a slog when I first started. I was doing this and doing that, and I was up to the ears in debt and and went out on a limb to do it. And I recognize where I'm at now. I don't have to make any of those decisions, but the decision-making framework I still use today. And this is a guy that's probably got, I don't know, I'm going to guess, somewhere between $5 and $8 million worth of cars sitting in his garage and workshop. No, not that one. Okay. Another guy.
Different guy.
Big player.
Yeah, okay.
And he's sitting on $5 or $6 million worth of cars in an air-conditioned, locked-up workshop where he keeps all these beautiful exotics and collectors things and all this sort of stuff. He said, I still look at that going, I could probably save a few quid on the lube if I buy that. all this different sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, I won't change that lens because I know what it took me to get to that. And those habits are good habits that have served me well. And he's someone that, by either definition, rich or wealthy, would be there. He's someone that would feature in a rich list if you're looking at it. But is living his life in a certain way because of delayed gratification.
So can we go back to the square mile for a moment? Let's go through this for our listeners here. It's also in our book, The Wealth Playbook. 29 years old, you've just left London, moved to Australia and retired.
Yeah.
How in the hell did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I made a lot of money. I mean, that was the first thing. I was very focused on what I did. But the key pivot point for me was, where do you step off of that?
Yeah.
And I think this is really important, because if you find yourself on a trajectory, sometimes it's very, very hard to stop. And you can look at that in lots of different lenses through life. I went through a really colorful and very hedonistic phase, bachelor phase in my life for probably close to 10 years, where it was an awful lot of fun. But I've got friends that were in that same group of people doing the same thing that are still there. They haven't been able to step off. And I made a conscious decision to step off, get married, have a beautiful family, and not change the trajectory of my life, but to do different things with my life, which mean a lot to me. They're still on that. And if they want to be there, and this is really, really important to understand, if you want to be where you are, you're in the right place.
Yeah, you're wealthy by definition, right?
But if you are stuck there, that's something that's quite different, because you're not necessarily there of your own volition. You're there because of the habits that you've created, or the convention that you've subscribed to. Career-wise, it would have been very, very easy to stay on the pathway I was, and I'd still be there, burned out, washed out, and don't get me wrong, London is still my favorite city in the world. But I felt that I was looking for more from my life than was on offer there. I'd succeeded in achieving a financial goal that I'd set myself. In fact, it wasn't my financial goal. I'd set my financial goal, which I busted, and then I busted in the upgrade of that again. And well, this is a game you can keep playing. You worked hard to get here. But I wasn't fulfilled. And I think success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure.
So is it safe to say that at that point in your life, you were rich by definition, but not necessarily wealthy?
Yeah, 100%. Because every morning at 7 o'clock, I could tell you exactly where I was going to be, not through choice.
Got the tube, went to the office.
Got on the tube, depending on what had gone on the night before. Benji's bacon and egg torpedo. If anyone's been in London, they know exactly what I'm talking about on the way in. And I knew where I'd be at 7:15, and I knew when that bell rang where I was going to be and what I'd be doing. And I knew at 4 o'clock when it finished up where I'd be and what I'd be doing. And don't get me wrong, I like structure. I still enjoy structure. But somebody else is dictating to you where and what you're going to do. And I remember I was in Ireland one time with one of my best buddies in Wexford, which is just the most beautiful place. And we'd partied hard. It was over a long weekend. And I kind of called the office and said, I can't get back. The flight's cancelled. And they said, you'll either be back or you're gone.
How'd you respond?
I was back at work.
Okay. We had a boss. You had someone to answer to.
And so, and sometimes you need someone to jank your chain and get back into your lane where you need to be. And that's not a bad thing either. It's not a rebellion against authority session. But anyway, I'm going through this. And I remember I was on the bus using public transport like everybody does to get around the city. And I was just looking around, and I just didn't feel that the future I wanted for me at that time, I was obviously not married, didn't have kids or anything like that, just wasn't going to be there. And I was prepared to roll the dice and go, do you know something? I'm going to walk away. And I absolutely got laid into by all of my peers.
You're crazy, Philly.
You're mad, you're leaving. What are you going to go do?
Such a good job opportunity here. All
going to be on Home and Away, are you, or whatever? Just all the lovely supportive stuff from people that aren't actually in your corner. And I think on reflection, maybe with a little bit of maturity, those naysayers that shoot you down are just jealous because they don't have the courage to do it themselves. And if I look at some of my peer group, very sadly, one of my best mates has just been in hospital. He's an alcoholic. He's very sick because of that, because he wasn't able to get off that treadmill and the stress levels that go with that job. And I'm not making an excuse for him or anybody else, meant that some of the life decisions he made resulted in that. Yet back in that time, 99, he was in a far more significant position and opportunity position than I was to really pave his way to a great future, and blew it by, I guess, not having the confidence to know what he wanted outright and step off and go and grab it. And I feel I did. And so, yeah, I came to Australia and surfed badly, played golf even worse than my surfing, if that's even possible, and traded from home. And that was the start of my new life in Brisbane back in those days.
So interesting, isn't it? You know, you can have everything, but if you don't have yourself, then you really don't have anything at all.
Yeah, and I went through periods of self-doubt with that. Have I done the right thing? You know, particularly back then because, you know, it's not that long, it's 25, 26 years ago, but technology was different. Yeah, there wasn't FaceTime or Facebook and the different ways. You had email, but, you know, keeping in touch with your family, you know, I'm very close to my parents, mum and dad, and friends and whatnot. And it did seem like you're on the other side of the world, and it felt like a long way away. But I made a decision that I wasn't going to go back home for 4 years. I was going to sink the boat, and I was going to make Australia my home. I could have gone home. I had the means to do it. I could have done it easily, but I chose not to because I wanted to be committed to the new chapter of my life. My parents were in a position where they could come out on holiday, which they did frequently, which was wonderful. And that was a courageous choice. It was also, I don't know, a lot of people go, maybe it was a cop-out, you're trying to get away from London because you couldn't handle it. No, I don't believe so. I mean, there's a wonderful quote, you know, if you're tired of London, you're tired of living, which I think, Winston Churchill, I think might have been. But, you know, it still is one of my favourite cities, but I was looking for more. And I think sometimes life rewards you if you're looking. Sometimes you can go up a dry gully. And there were times when I moved here, I thought, have I really done the right thing here? But time has demonstrated that absolutely it was the right thing.
So let's draw on this a little bit more. And you mentioned something I'd like to talk about specifically about knowing what you want and designing a life. And I'll start this with a bold assertion. I don't think that wealth has anything to do with your net worth, like what most people think. I think wealthy people are able to design their life, whatever their circumstances are, to the best of their ability to get the most amount of output and the most amount of whatever it is that they're wanting out of it. So let's talk about how one could design their life. So I'm talking about your purpose, how you live, how you spend your time. What's your advice?
I think you got to know what you want. And so many people are drifting where what they do is just the norm, and we've just gone through New Year's Eve and it's just another year, the clock's just ticked over. Oh, it's going to be a good year, but there's no real reason behind that other than the spirit of optimism. Don't get me wrong, I love the spirit of optimism. That's why the stock market generally rises, because people are more optimistic about the future than not. But they're just in a drift, and time really goes past very, very quickly until they kind of realize, shock horror, that they're not necessarily where they want to be. And that's not just financially. You know, you equally have that conversation from a health perspective where you kind of drift off on a pathway that's not a good one. I've just explained one of my dear friends who, I find really hard to come to terms with, that you can drift into a particular pathway almost by accident, and time goes by significantly quickly. So I think you've got to know what you want. Once you know what you want, once you've got a guiding North Star, and it's not about stuff. That's something that's really, really important to understand. It's not, what do I want? I want $10 million or $100 million. That's a rubbish goal. Don't get me wrong. If it gives you a kick up the pants to do something with life, great. But it's, why do you want that? You have to have a guiding North Star. And that needs to be more of a value proposition as to why do you want that, which leads into the lifestyle of becoming wealthy. So if you want that because you feel it's going to give you more choice in how you spend your time, or what you do with your time, or where you're able to focus your attention and efforts, then suddenly you've got a North Star that's going to kind of guide you. And most people just don't know what they want. Oh, I want to be happy. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does that actually look? Oh, like a Ferrari. Well, they're great, but I can tell you now, it's not going to make you happy, especially when you're in the chair for 18 grand for a new set of ceramic brakes. But
is that what's going to cost me after I get mine?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So,
thanks for that.
But there's an example of, you want something without giving it some real thought. If it's, you want a Ferrari, why do you want a Ferrari? I don't know. Maybe it's a little bauble to say, hey, I've been successful enough to buy this. Okay, well, that's maybe something that's going to give you some fuel, but what do you really want it?
What's how other people see you, really.
Yeah. So in which case, you're all about how other people see you as opposed to how you see yourself, which means you don't really have that much self-confidence, which is because you think that's going to make you happy, and it won't.
Ooh, this is getting deep, isn't it?
This is a real woolly one. And these are all things I've gone through, and you will go through, and you've gone through some of them already.
I'm going through them right now. Some of these things you're talking about and stuff I deal with daily.
I know you want a McLaren. So there's an example, and that might be something. And you're smaller than me, so you'll fit in the chair. My fat backside won't. So Elvis bottom here. But it's asking that real driver. And I think once you've got, and it's like a business. Let's just step out of this for a minute and appreciate this might maybe a bit of a weave. If you've got a business that's got a mission statement, that's kind of the thing you throw out there. But the vision and values that sit behind it make it very, very easy to make decisions, because you can go, is this a decision that supports their vision and values or not? And if it doesn't, it's gone. And if it does, it's implemented. It's really simple, just like we do stuff here. And I think in your own life, if you've got a really clear intention of what you want and why you want it, and that's your kind of map of the world in terms of these are things that are important to me, and they change over time, then it makes all your decisions align with that. So if you're going to say, I'm going to invest in this, and you go, okay, but your overarching environment goal of a greener planet is investing in a coal company going to facilitate that. Immediately there's a conflict, so you don't do it. Simple example. And I think, in terms of designing your life, having a very, very clear idea. So what do you want? Okay, where do you want to live? Why do you want to live there? How do you want to work? What sort of work do you want to engage in? Is it work where there's a time for dollars, or is it something that you want to scale your expertise, or is it something where you want to have IP and get paid a royalty fee for forever and a day with that which you do, so that you genuinely have passive income? Then what are you going to do with that passive income? You're going to find a bunch of mates in the same boat and party and have nice boozy lunches every Friday, or are you going to pile that into the next thing? Or are you going to find a couple of board seats to sit on to fill your time, or are you going to be more engaged as a parent? These are all the things that ultimately, if you can answer them, will make you happy. If you can't answer them, you've got a conflict, because you're not living your life, and you can't live somebody else's. That would be great, they do this. You only make a good you make a woeful somebody else.
So if we can summarize wealthy then, mate, because I think we've traded plenty of blows here. Decision, priority, value system, time, choice, security. They're really the main things that wealthy people exhibit regardless of their income class. Very different to being rich, which is flashy watches, flashy cars, and probably a lot of debt.
They're not mutually exclusive. Maybe the debt thing possibly is, but they're not mutually exclusive. You can have all of that if it's something that's something that's important to you. And you will go through phases where having some color sometimes is the thing that kicks you up the pants and motivates you to do the thing that's necessary to get the bigger outcome. You thought it might, I want a McLaren, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I know if I do that and save, and I've got a couple of properties and my portfolio's done this, I can afford that, plus it's in the company, so I can get a tax deduction, da-da-da-da-da. That might then give you the spurt to get to that next level within your drive.
I've had that happen to me before, if I can share an example on that. The first time I went to Europe, at the time I spent what I thought was a fortune on the trip, which by most people's definition would be a lot. And by the time I got back, I said that was worth every cent. I'd do that 10 times over. And I think that was the thing that once I'd had the color, I saw how good it was. That then put me into that next gear of, right, I'm doing this every single year, which means I now need to do X, Y, Z.
So that becomes, ultimately your vision of the world, your map of the world, your goals, your expectations, where you want to drop anchor is the steering wheel. You need something that's going to tell you that. And how hard you want to work at the accelerator or brake comes down to how motivated you are. And if color is something that motivates you, then do it. If backing away and going, look, I'm not into material things, what I'm about is my spiritual journey, where I'm not selling my soul to the devil and having to do a job that I don't like doing, that's a totally different thing too. We're all different in terms of what we want, but I think if you're able to focus on what it actually is, to be able to describe it, and further to that, you talk about wealthy. Wealth for me now is the environment I'm creating for my family, and that comes with the amount of time I'm able to spend with them, the life lessons that I'm sharing with them, and ultimately the legacy that I want to create for them. I'm not planning on falling off the perch anytime soon. I want to create an environment where my legacy will be kids that are really empowered and confident to have a go at what's important to them in their life without a fear of failure, and to have a good moral compass around that, to know, what's important, family values, doing the right thing, honesty, integrity, work ethic, all of those sorts of things to go along. And that for me is the great wealth transfer that people are talking about. There's this money shift that's going on in the world. I'm going to inherit a property in Sydney and a place in Noosa, well, millions of dollars I never knew I had because, my parents that worked hard that built all that are going to leave it to me. That's okay. But if you don't know what to do with it, you could probably fritter that away very, very quickly. For me, that legacy, that wealth transfer is the legacy I want to leave my kids, because that's something that's a force for good. And it's something that you're just propagating the work that you've done onto the next generation and beyond. And I think for me, yeah, they're the drivers right now. And sure, having a different car in the garage would be a nice bit of color. Will it make that much difference to my life? Probably not. But seeing my kids achieve what I hope their aspirations are probably will make me cry.
There you have it. Thank you, AB, for sharing. Very personal, this one, albeit lots of gold nuggets in there for our listeners.
Let's hope so. There's something in there for everyone, I hope. And just go after it. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to go after it. Don't live in fear. Have a crack. You get one, go at it. Do it well.
Done. Thanks, AB.
There you have it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button. We'll look forward to hosting you next week.